know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Big Money CJ. Big Money CJ. Can you tell me what today is today? What is the start of today? Give it to me, brother. Tell me what today is.
It's the start of the playoffs, my friend.
That's what's up. That's what's up. That's the shit I like. Yes.
Nothing better.
I'm waiting for this day. Yes. Nothing better. You just came, judging by the fact you are wearing a suit, I assume you were at the Leafs morning skate on this Monday.
Leafs and Lightning. It's going to be a fun series, I think, actually. Not just because I get to witness it live, but I think with, two teams that have been at the top of the standings for a long time, tons of individual offensive superstars, of which one or two or three or four will probably have a pretty big imprint on the series one way or another. And, I think too, look, it's the stakes are so high for Toronto, and I would almost say so low for Tampa. Obviously they want to win their third straight cup, but if they were to lose a series, I don't think anyone's saying anything different about the Lightning. Whereas, obviously a lot riding on what happens here for the Maple Leafs.
Absolutely. And we're going to do full previews as best as we can for each of the first round playoff series in this episode. We're going to go through all of the NHL award results from our fan poll as well. We're going to try to keep it playoff centric for today's episode. I know there's some other news and notes going around with coaching vacancies and job searches. If that's okay, we're going to move that to Thursday because today's episode is going to be loaded enough with enough playoff content. We don't need to inundate it with other stuff that might not necessarily have to do with teams who are going to be playing throughout the summer. So the Winnipeg Jets, we'll have to wait on talking about the Winnipeg Jets for at least another 2-3 days. I hope that's okay. I don't want to upset Jets Nation over here too much.
It is a pretty spicy locker cleanout comments though around the Jets. Stastny saying that individuals are playing for individuals. Marc leaving open his future of the team. There's a lot to digest in Winnipeg, so maybe letting the dust settle is not the worst course of action because I think there's going to be a lot of news out of that city this summer.
Oh, absolutely. Before we get to all that extra stuff, though, I'm just curious. You did look with the Lightning series, the Leaf series. Again, we're going to have all our thoughts on how that series could go. Can you tell us how you're going to go about covering it? What's the situation? Are you traveling? What's going on with you for that series?
Yeah, I'm blanketing the series. So I'll be at all the games in Toronto and Tampa. It obviously has made the off day availabilities as I can make pending travel and all that kind of thing. But really for the purposes of North Star Bets, TSN, my two employers, I'm going to be all over this series. I'll be watching as much as I can of the other series as well. It gets a little tricky actually sometimes when you're living and breathing one particular series, and especially when you're traveling between cities, it's easy to lose a little bit of touch with what's happening elsewhere. You get to the weekend, you're usually at a practice somewhere, or there's afternoon games, all that type of thing. But, I think we can agree these are probably the best 2 weeks, frankly, of the NHL season. It's not to diminish the Stanley Cup final or the later rounds that come, but I think that the excitement that comes with having, 8 first-round series going on, as healthy as the teams are going to be, as jacked up and excited as players can be before the grind sets in, I think that this will be a wild time, and I'm excited to have a front row seat for Leafs and Lightning because it's been a while, man. It's been a hot minute, and especially as we're recording this now. I'm excited just to go to a playoff game with fans. It's been a long time, really, since we've seen that in Toronto. A couple of years. I was in Tampa in the Cup final in July where they had a full building, but without fans, the playoffs aren't quite the same playoffs. And this year, finally, we are back to normal in that regard.
You know what? That makes me think, remember when the 2005 lockout happened and they had those decals on the ice that said, "Thank you, fans." The fans have to kind of wait through a whole year with no hockey. It would almost be kind of cool if the NHL kind of brought that back for these games for the playoffs, considering some of the attendance restrictions they had to wait through.
For sure. And a lot of buildings last year, even in the playoffs in the States, were restricted too. It wasn't just in Canada where essentially we had no fans, or 2,000 or whatever it was in Montreal by the end. It's been a long wait, and that's one of my reflections from a sporting standpoint on the pandemic. Is just the sports lose a little bit of something without that natural soundtrack, without the energy that that fans bring, even to just the area around the arena on your way in, the anticipation for puck drop, like it really wasn't there. I mean, I think I went to 70 playoff games, give or take, in the 2020 bubble. You know, I was in Toronto doing 2 and 3 games a day. I went to Edmonton and did all the games there for the last 2 rounds. And man, it was a hollow, awful thing. I mean, it was great to be able to keep doing my job. Obviously, there's more important things in life going on. I recognize all that, but when we compare it to what we love about the sport, I mean, I've been waiting for a moment like this, and so you know we're going to see it hopefully here over the next 8 weeks across the continent. You know, we'll see who gets to play along and who gets to excite their fan base the most. But I can't imagine there'd be many people going to games tonight, whether it's in Toronto or Edmonton, the other couple places where there's games. And those fans aren't sort of pinching themselves because, you know, they really didn't get that opportunity in the last 2 years.
You know, CJ, some people wait a lifetime for a moment like this. I don't know if you actually meant to quote Kelly Clarkson just now, but you sort of did with a moment like this.
I can't take credit for that, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
Can you tell me also, when you're not watching the Leafs and Lightning, how are you going to go about following some of the other series? Do you have like a multi-screen setup?
No, just, you know, when I'm at home here in Toronto, I've got a TV and a phone that I'll use for 2. I don't have like one of these crazy setups though with like 3 screens in my living room or anything like that. You know, the road can be good and bad. I mean, often on an off day or off night, you can find a sports bar. You know, Tampa's got a couple good ones. Hat Tricks comes to mind that they always got all the games on. And so that's probably the best way to do it. And then let's face it, not everyone watches every game anymore. You're able to keep up with the highlights and what's going on through social media. So, you know, anything that goes to overtime, I'll definitely be trying to watch. And then just whatever the game of the moment is, whenever there's conflicts, you know, it'd be nice if they space the games out a little bit more like the NBA started to do, but, you know, we'll take baby steps. I'm just happy to have these games back.
So I know that with the playoffs underway, and I know you're going to be focused on Toronto and Tampa, there's one thing that's been on my mind for the last, like, how many days? That bet you made on the Florida Panthers, I believe during the All-Star break. Like, I got to say, with the Panthers, you know, being the best team in hockey, how are you feeling about that bet, like, right now?
I'd say reasonably good. You know, the one thing that gives me pause is the Panthers, you know, we placed the bet in February on behalf of the CJ Show at the Cosmopolitan Hotel Sportsbook.
Yes, sir.
You know, hoping to have a nice dinner out with producer Nick and Julian if we ever cash that bet.
Yes, sir.
I'm a little concerned that they went and won the President's Trophy from there on in, because I didn't necessarily know that was going to happen. And we know that there's not a long history of teams converting the regular season championship, so to speak, into a Stanley Cup championship. So that makes me a little nervous. Maybe they unloaded a little bit too much goodwill or good vibes, good shooting luck, whatever, throughout the season. But look, if you could pick a team now to make a midseason bet, we did pretty well. I think our odds were 9-1, and you know, last I looked, they're better than that now if you were to place the same bet today. So we're on the good side of that bet. But man, it's so hard to pick what team's going to win a Stanley Cup. Like, who really knows? Honestly, who had Montreal going to the final last year? Who had Dallas 2 years ago in the final? I mean, it's a tough game. But you know, I'm gonna ride our Panthers bet as long as we can take it.
Oh man, I'm just gonna be real with you here. Like, I get it. You did the bet on behalf of the CJ Show, and I firmly appreciate that you did. I'm kind of gonna hedge the bet a little bit for myself, though. There's another team I kind of want to see win the Stanley Cup this year. Please don't be mad. I'm sorry. Is that okay? You guys gonna be cool with that?
That's fine, as long as you're willing to share your spoils with your hedge. Then.
That's fair. Look, I just want to be invited to the CJ Show dinner if the Panthers win, and you're going to be balling out because I've hung out with you before. You could ball out. I just don't want to lose the invite.
You haven't lost it. You're good, brother.
Okay, that's good. Since we're talking about betting, and one thing I should let everyone know here, because we're talking about betting, I'd like to see if we could bring in David Bastill of Sports Interaction so I could bring up that Panthers bet and just kind of get his reactions to that. You know, he seems to know a thing or two about betting, does his thing on the SDP show. So why not bring him on for the CJ Show on behalf of Sports Interaction? Let's bring him in. David Bastill from Sports Interaction. Dude, thank you so much for kicking it with us, man.
Good to be here, guys. Looking forward to this.
I should mention for Sports Interaction, only available for people 19 plus. If you are gambling, please play responsibly. I mentioned that CJ, on behalf of the CJ Show, made a bet on the Florida Panthers to win the Stanley Cup just around the All-Star break, so a couple of months ago here.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's you would think it's a pretty good bet. I'm just since you're the expert here, I'd like to know your thoughts on that.
I like the bet. Good time to do it. I had a couple friends bet the Atlantic Division Championship or the Division Championship for the Panthers. They won some good cash. And the thing about CJ's bet is good value on it right now too, because at Sports Interaction you could get it for about 6-1, 5.5-1, somewhere in that range. So he's already on the right side of it. You do have the President's Trophy curse, though. That's the only thing that that I'd be a little nervous about. But you know what? Strong team, top to bottom. We shall see.
Okay. What about in terms of the numbers now for if you want to make a bet on a team to win the Stanley Cup?
Well, right now at Sports Interaction, they're projecting an Avalanche Panthers final. That's based on the numbers only. So those are your two top teams in both conferences to meet. Some of the value plays right now look like it's the Hurricanes at a 12. So you get the Canes at about 12-1. And the number one thing, and I've been on a lot of these type of shows across the country, the number one thing people are looking at right now is, am I betting the Wild or the Blues to make the run? Because they're both pretty good value picks around 18-20-1, but who's going to win the first round series? That's the biggest question, right? Because you can kill a ticket in the first round, or if you bet the right team, you have a pretty good chance there, because there's a lot of people are saying that, you know what, do they go on that run? Are they able to upset the Avalanche? I think they are, but we shall see.
Okay. Yeah. I don't want to tip my hand on who I want to pick for that, because
I was waiting for that because you teased it and
I did.
And then you never told me what it was.
That's very fair, because we are going to get to a playoff preview a little later on. I don't want to start telling everybody which teams I'm going to actually pick. I mean, CJ too. CJ also has to, think about the teams he wants to pick as well, right?
Absolutely.
Right, okay. One other thing I want to mention as well. What about like Underdog Picks?
Right now, Underdog Picks, as far as series are concerned, I'm looking at a couple of them right now. We have been receiving a little bit of money on the Los Angeles Kings in an upset pick over the Oilers. I'm not sure if I'm buying that. Also, the other one, and this is kind of a little bit of a surprise to me. New York Rangers are actually dogs against the Pittsburgh Penguins. I look at that as a toss-up, guys. I almost look at that saying that's an even out there, but right now there is some value on the New York Rangers to win that series. But that's basically it across the board. There's not too love on the Preds. I'm not surprised there just because of their goaltending problems right now. That series in itself, predictably, has been the only one that is getting a lot of money for a series sweep. So the Avalanche in 4 against the Preds, which I think would not surprise me whatsoever.
I think for the Kings one, maybe just a thought here. The fact that the Oilers are going up against Phil Deneau and Ante Kopitar, two good centers who are used to going up teams' best players, and they know a thing or two about that. Maybe that's why they're thinking the Kings could be as good. I work at the Athletic as well, and I think we did this playoff predictions thing, and I think one person on our staff picked the Predators to beat the Avalanche, and the guy who writes for the Predators is actively trying to figure out who made the pick, because I think it's a clean sweep for the Colorado Avalanche. But you know what? Weirder things have happened. Okay, last thing for you, David.
Sure.
Austin Matthews. This is a little bit more to CJ's interest, as he is covering the Toronto Tampa Bay series. What about the prop bet up for the amount of goals that Austin Matthews could score in the series against Tampa?
Yeah, it's only the series. So the number one thing is you have to kind of figure out how many games is a series going to go, because that could determine how many goals he scores. So we have props for 0 right to 10. You have to hit it exactly. Right now, the money at Sports Interaction has either 4 or 5 goals in the series, which really doesn't surprise me a lot. There is some value when you get into the 6s and the 7s as far as how many goals Matthews will score. And if you're going on the other side of it and thinking Lightning shut him down completely, I'm not buying that, but 1 or 2 goals will pay you any between 9-1 and 7-1 in that category. I think the number's right around 4 or 5. Especially if the Leafs win, that could even hit a 6. What about you for total goals, Austin Matthews in the series?
Okay, so Austin had 1 goal against the Canadiens last year.
Yeah.
If I were a betting man, I could actually use that SIG if I were a betting man for the segment. I might go towards the 3 goal, actually. I think he's going to more likely be in that range. I don't think he's going to be completely shut down. I don't necessarily see him going completely like blanked. I mean, unless the Tampa Bay Lightning defense would be really good against him. I just don't see that.
Well, he is going to draw Victor Hedman, I'm guessing, for most of the series. So we shall see. Top scorer, one of the top defensemen. I love it. Great first round matchup.
Very, very true. CJ, were you thinking 3.5? Or are you thinking a little less than that? What were you thinking?
Oh, I'm taking over 3.5 if you were setting it there. I know that's not the exactly what David was describing, but he scored 0.8 goals, 0.82 in the season. So if you think it's going to be a 6-game series, that's 5 goals. I don't see any reason to think it'll be different. You can reference last year's Montreal. He had 35 shots in that series. If when you talk about playing odds or playing betting, I don't think he's going to go 1 for 35 again. If he can get 35 shots, I bet he'll score 5 or 6 goals in the series.
Yeah, that seems like it. We'll have to wait and see with how this series goes. David, thank you so much for kicking it with us here on the CJ Show.
Thanks, guys.
Well, CJ, I have to admit, I probably should have let you talk a little bit more in that last segment. I kind of hijacked it a little bit. I went a little crazy. Sorry.
I thought you cut me right out of it. So I was just enjoying the ride.
People think I talk too much on the show, and that is just going to fuel a lot of haters' comments on that. So I got to be more mindful of that. Oh well, that's okay.
You're giving them the exact gas they're looking for, brother. You
don't think I talk too much on the show?
Well, it's not for me to say. It's what the listeners think, my friend.
It's your show. You should say something. You could say something. You're totally in your rights to say I talk too much on the CJ Show.
But that's not my opinion. I didn't say that. You're saying that's what the haters are saying. I try not to pay attention to the haters. I got enough problems these days with them.
Okay. Well, this is why you're a really good friend, CJ, and I really appreciate you. Okay. Speaking of, the opposite of haters, actually, fans. We did a fan poll a couple of days ago, and we asked everyone to submit their picks for each of the major individual awards. And over the weekend, we closed the responses. Over 700 responses for our poll. Thank you very much to everybody who submitted their answers, their ballots. And Siege, we're going to go through all of them. Some of them we're going to mention percentages. Others we're just going to mention the top choices. But I'm curious to know what we have out of these responses. You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We're going to go through each of these individually. We'll give our thoughts on these. We'll start off with, I'm going to go on down and then not bring up the Hart Trophy right away. This award, the Marc Messier NHL Leadership Award, I'm really curious at how people would have voted for it. But the top vote getter ended up being Ryan Getzlaff of the Anaheim Ducks, who is now retired, played his final games with the Ducks, and now is retired. What do you think about Ryan Getzlaff winning the NHL Leadership Award?
Well, you could do worse than pick that. I actually don't know how that award's selected. I don't know who selects that award. It's certainly not voted on by the writers. So I don't know the exact criteria, but it tends to seem to be a little bit narrative driven. And why not have a longtime captain, someone who spent an entire career with an organization, had lots of success down in Anaheim. I mean, I think that makes some sense. And look, he's got a chance to win that, I would think.
So among some of the other ones, Sidney Crosby, Patrice Bergeron mentioned as well. Jason Spezza getting a mention. Barkov getting a mention. Kopitar, Matthews getting a mention. You're going to hear Matthews' name a lot in this particular segment. We'll move on to the Masterton Trophy. This one, I wasn't sure if people were going to mention this guy as the top dog, but he would have been my pick if I had a choice. Carey Price, who made his return this season after rehabbing from a knee injury and being in the player assistance program. He is at the top of the Masterton Trophy votes, according to us. What do you think?
No issues on my end. I think the Masterton's one of those awards. I mean, you're almost comparing people that have been through different struggles or personal challenges. It's hard to say one over the other to me. I actually cast a ballot for the Masterton. I picked Jack Eichel, who obviously fought and for his right to have a surgery no NHL players had, came back for Vegas. But, if Carey Price is the one who wins the award, I certainly wouldn't say that's a bad choice by anyone. And as I say, I find it can be a tricky award to vote on because the criteria is vague, and there's usually 5 or 10 or 20 pretty compelling, players that are elected, because each chapter of the PHWA nominates a player from their team. So, I don't know where the voters will go, but I'm not going to argue with the people that listen to this show. So Carey Price is the Masterton favorite.
2 other names actually got more votes than Jack Eichel for this honor, according to us: Kevin Hayes and Brian Boyle. Boyle, I believe, that wasn't even playing hockey last year. If I'm trying to remember what his situation was, because he was playing obviously with the Penguins earlier this year, and
he didn't get a contract, and he went and played at the World Championships for the U.S. and ended up parlaying that into a job in Pittsburgh. I mean, great story. He's won the Masterton before. If you remember, he had a season where he had to deal with some cancer treatments. I could see him getting some love. Again, there's a ton of players there. I think the one thing everyone has to keep in mind with all awards, there's not always a right answer, a singular right answer. I think that they're, it's when you approach it that way, it's an easier way to look at it. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this with the Hart or the Norris. I mean, reasonable people can look at the same thing and come to 2 different conclusions. So, I've got no issue with any of those guys receiving votes.
Yeah, and Kevin Hayes, obviously playing through the loss of his brother Jimmy from earlier this year as well, also mentioned in the discussion. Let's move on to the King Clancy Trophy for humanitarian contributions. Ryan Hartman leads it, and then Wayne Simmons and PK Subban also mentioned as well, John Tavares, but the voters said Ryan Hartman.
Is that just due to him donating the money that was raised for his fine there, or?
That might be it, because I can't think of any reason why he would end up leading it for us, essentially. That was
there. I don't. I'm not always aware of every player's off ice. Some players are more private, I guess, than others about what they're doing off ice. It's hard to argue with what PK Subban's done over the years.
Absolutely.
A lot of very generous humanitarian minded players in the league. And so again, that's not one where I'm going to say that you're picking the wrong guy.
To the General Manager of the Year award, the Jim Gregory General Manager of the Year award, the winner, according to us, Bill Zito of the Florida Panthers, Kyle Dubas and Joe Sakic also getting mentions, Brad Treliving as well, and Bill Guerin, among others.
Issues. I mean, the thing to note about that award is the real award doesn't get voted on until after the second round. So usually you're down to 4 teams at that point, and usually 3 of the 4 GMs that get nominated are teams that get to the conference finals. So, it doesn't mean that our list will look exactly as is, because it'll probably depend a little bit on the playoffs, how that voting goes. But, Bill Zito's done a really nice job, I think, in finding some slightly below the radar players, or just assembling the parts of this team that went and won the President's Trophy. I mean, whether it's Anthony Duclair, some of the moves he made on the blue line, getting Sam Reinhart, proved to be a really beneficial move for Florida. And so, I think that he's got a strong case. I think Kyle Dubas did a nice job of managing the Leafs cap situation last summer. They really didn't have a lot of money. They let Frederik Andersen and Zach Hyman walk, and still, had a season where they got to 115 points, the most in franchise history. The Wild were successful for Bill Guerin. I mean, all those GMs will be in the mix for the actual thing. And, the finalists, as I say, will probably depend on what happens here in the next month and which teams play on into the third round.
Also, if you are wondering at home, yes, Jesse Blake did get votes in our fan poll for this award. All right, let's go.
Without a cup, I'm surprised.
Yeah, geez, he's still doing that once in 67 series. But hey, you know what? No judgment. The Lady Byng Trophy, Most Gentlemanly Player Award. Jack Campbell, the leading vote getter. Kyle Connor also getting mentioned. Tom Wilson getting mentioned. I was wondering if Jack Hughes would be a leading contender for this. I know he was hurt, but he didn't take that many penalty minutes, if any, this year.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine a goaltender. I've never heard of a goalie winning that award, so it's funny that Jack Campbell led it. I mean, certainly not saying he isn't a gentlemanly player, but it's hard to measure. I gave Kyle Connor my number 1 vote on the ballot I submitted on Monday. I just think 2 penalty minutes, it's basically measuring the most gentlemanly player who also plays the game at a high level. And so I think he's a worthy choice. I had Joe Pavelski on my ballot. Won't go through my whole ballot because I'm not sure I'm supposed to do that. But those are some of the guys that caught my attention. I like looking for defensemen too, because the defensemen that you see that play big minutes and don't take a lot of penalties. I mean, that's that's its own skill. It's hard to be defending a lot of the time on the ice and not, be going to the penalty box. I think that's why Jacob Slavin got a lot of attention last year, and I believe won the award. So, I think it's Kyle Connors to lose, but we'll see how the real voters think.
The Jack Adams Award for Coach of the Year, the top vote getter would have been my pick, Daryl Sutter of the Calgary Flames. Andrew Burnett and Gerard Gallant also getting consideration for this honor.
Yeah, I didn't vote on this one, so I haven't given it much thought. Look, usually the guy that wins that award, usually he's got a good goaltender. So Gerard Gallant seems like a pretty good choice with the way Shesterkin played in New York. I've always wondered why more of the top coaches don't get it. We don't tend to see in their prime, John Cooper, for example, winning that award, or Jared Bednar. The guys who coach the best teams in the league don't seem to get lots of love for this award. It tends to be maybe guys that take over teams that surprise a little bit more. And so that's the group I think will probably get the most attention when it comes to casting those ballots.
We are getting closer to the nitty and the gritty of this poll. The Calder Memorial Trophy for Rookie of the Year, with 48.9% of the vote off the responses. Moritz Seider of the Detroit Red Wings is the top vote getter. Second place, Michael Bunting, 27.9. Third place, Trevor Zegras at 17.9. But the majority of the voters say Moritz Seider should win this honor.
And on my ballot, I have all three of those guys in my top three, slightly different order. I went Seider, then Zegras, then Bunting. I think Seider, when you just look at the minutes he played, the impact he had in Detroit, the situational usage, I think he's a worthy candidate. And, I don't know where everyone will fall on this. And we've sort of debated the Bunting age thing. I mean, he had the most points among rookies, but obviously he had a pretty plum spot with Matthews and Marner on the Leafs top line for most of the season. But a different experience too, having played so much pro hockey before this year. So, it was a good bunch of rookies, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if our voters are reflective of how the PHWA 200 voters vote, and Seider is ultimately the Rookie of the Year.
Let's go to the Vezina Trophy for Best Goaltender. With 81% of the vote, 81.1 to be specific, Igor Shesterkin of the New York Rangers is who our fans think should win the Vezina Trophy. Jacob Markstrom out in Calgary at 11.4% in second place. Frederik Andersen, 3.4%. So a bit of a drop off between first and third. Also a bit surprised that UC Saros didn't get much love. Only got 0.7% of the vote. But the top three, Shesterkin, Markstrom, and Freddie Andersen. But the majority of voters think Igor Shesterkin should win.
Well, it doesn't need to be a long analysis here. I mean, I think with even just the gap between save percentage from Shesterkin and everyone else in the league, he was a cut above, and I think quite clearly the goaltender that deserves that award this season.
Okay. To the Selke Trophy for Best Defensive Forward, Patrice Bergeron, 72.8% of the vote. Michael Backlund getting some love out in Calgary, 5.7%. Marcus Foligno out in Minnesota, 3.7%. Those are the top three. Elias Lindholm out in Calgary, not too far off from Foligno, but the majority of voters think it's Patrice Bergeron's award to lose.
I tend to agree with him. I mean, he's nominated every single year, and quite deservingly so. If you look at the impacts, I mean, this was an outrageous year with the underlying numbers for Bergeron. I mean, for a guy that potentially is in his final season, he's 37 years old. He still tilts the ice considerably when he's on it. The expected goals for, the shot attempts, I mean, everything is in the 60% in Boston's favor when he's playing. His usage has changed a little bit over the years. I think we've seen this around the league. He starts more shifts in the offensive zone, for example, but I don't think that'll work against him enough. And I think Patrice Bergeron could be, who knows, might be a career capper for him. I'm not going to rush him out of the league, but he hasn't committed to coming back next year. But it still wouldn't surprise me if he's awarded that Selke Trophy.
It is now time for the Norris Trophy for Best Defenseman. 65.3% say Roman Josi should win it. 29.3% say Cale Makar should win it. And at 2.8%, Charlie McAvoy. Those are the top three vote getters, according to our poll for the Norris Trophy for Best Defenseman. But the majority say Roman Josi should win it.
I really struggled with this one. So many great seasons, so many great candidates. I actually gave Cale Makar my number one vote. Norris, I believe he had around 85 points. wasn't too far off the pace we saw by Yossi. Scored more goals, and I think if you look at some of the underlying possession numbers, had a mildly better season. You're trying to identify the best all-around defenseman in the game. I think Victor Hedman deserves some attention in addition to the guys you mentioned for that kind of season. Devon Taves, Aaron Ekblad, I think are all sort of worthy of top 5 votes in some order thereabouts. And our listeners did a pretty good job of identifying the top guys, though.
We did include polls for the Art Ross and the Rocket Richard Trophy, which have already been won by Austin for the Rocket and Connor McDavid for the Art Ross Trophy. And that is who our voters lean towards. No real surprises in terms of second and third place, but not really one we're going to spend too much time on with those two, since it's less of opinion and more factual. So let's just go to the final two here. The Ted Lindsay Award for most outstanding player as voted on by the players. 50.5% of the vote going to Austin Matthews. Connor McDavid
why would we do a Hart and a Lindsay? I mean, isn't it the same kind of award for the purposes of our listeners? Or
they kind of just put both. Well, when Robert and Yams put together the shout out our mods, Robert and Yams, they did put the awards. They kind of just included all the awards here. So I do understand you are kind of voting for the same thing here, but maybe they're just kind of going off what they think the players might do. Because remember, it is the players voting for the Ted Lindsay. So 50.5% saying that Austin Matthews will win it, and 33.9% going to Connor McDavid. And then in third place, Johnny Gaudreau at 11%. And I guess to kind of skip ahead a little bit here, it's the same top 3 for the Hart Memorial. However, second and third flip for the Hart Memorial Trophy. So Austin wins both the Ted Lindsay and the Hart Memorial, according to our fans. But whereas second would go to McDavid and third to Gaudreau for the Ted Lindsay honor, for the Hart Trophy, seems as if Johnny Gaudreau is second and Connor McDavid is third. So more people think that Johnny Gaudreau is more deserving of the Hart Trophy than Connor McDavid. That's actually more interesting than anything else.
Well, I think you can make the case. It's not how I voted.
Absolutely.
But I mean, Johnny Gaudreau had 80 plus even strength points, had by far his best career year. I don't think it's a crazy vote. I did have McDavid ahead of Gaudreau on my ballot. But look, there's any number of candidates there. I gave Austin Matthews my number one vote ultimately, with McDavid second. I think that's going to be the most common ballot, I would assume, in some order. Some people might have McDavid then Matthews, or Matthews and McDavid. To me, that's probably going to be what you see most often on the ballots. The other guys up for consideration, I think Igor Shesterkin will get some love there. Roman Yossi or Cale Makar both might get some love. Kirill Kaprizov is in my top 5 for the Hart. Jonathan Huberdeau's had a great season. He'll probably appear on some ballots somewhere in that top 5. I mean, there's a group of players. Maybe Sidney Crosby I started to see some love online. I don't know, where he'll land on some ballots, but there's so many great individual years this year. I think that there was a number of guys that you could make a case for. And, but I would say that McDavid, Matthews are going to finish one too. We just have to wait until June to find out the order.
Is Steven Stamkos worthy of any like third, fourth, or fifth place vote? Maybe not third, but like fourth or fifth place.
I didn't have him in my top 5, but if I saw him in someone's top 5, I wouldn't blink. I wouldn't say, what are you thinking? Kind of back to my original point. I don't believe that I did my best with my ballot to the best of the way I saw things, but I'm willing to accept that there are other, maybe even better ways of looking at the season and critiquing it. So why not? I mean, Stamkos had a ridiculous year given that it's his 14th season. He admitted actually that some of it might've been driven by a desire to make Team Canada. This was a year that started with him wanting to get that kind of attention. Obviously the NHL players didn't go to the Olympics. It was a moot point ultimately, but the truth is he put himself in position to be selected for that team. Had that been something that went ahead and happened, and he didn't slow down the second half. He put up 20 points across his last 7 games, give or take. So pretty impressive season from number 91 in Tampa.
Yep. So with that, that concludes the fan poll. Thank you everyone who contributed ballots and let us know where they were voting from. We have people from all across Canada, all across the States, different parts of Europe contributing to this, and all other parts of the world as well. So thank you very much to everyone who contributed to the CJ Show fan poll. You are very much appreciated. Small businesses are ready to thrive again and looking for resources to rise to the challenge. That's why Dell Technologies has assembled an all-star lineup of podcasters for the third year in a row to create a virtual conference to share advice and inspiration for small businesses. Whether you're still working remotely or back together again, let Dell Technologies help safeguard your business with modern devices and Windows 11 Pro. Search Dell Technologies Small Business Podference on Odyssey.com, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts starting on May 10th. You don't need a summer getaway to transport yourself. Book your smooth escape with the wax experts at European Wax Center. A fresh wax transports you to a smooth state of mind where you feel effortlessly confident. This summer, whether you're going far away or sticking closer to home, the relaxed, confident feeling you're dreaming of is much closer than you think. Just visit your local European Wax Center. The European Wax Center online booking system actually makes getting a reservation quite simple and straightforward. You can use the EWC app to book your waxing service. The secret is their signature comfort wax. It's a proprietary blend of beeswax sourced from Europe and other skin soothing ingredients that allow EWC to remove hair easily for a virtually pain-free experience. This summer, visit that feel-good state at European Wax Center. Summer is here. I'm going to be in some bathing suits. I'm going to be hanging out by the pool, hanging out. I know I want to feel confident in my skin, and I'm sure you do as well. So head on over to EWC European Wax Center. Book your smooth escape with the experts at European Wax Center. Make a reservation today. Your first wax is free. People, it's Julian here with a message from Athletic Greens. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient and daily nutrition, especially heading into the flu and cold season. Ugh, it's not a fun time. In just one scoop and a cup of water every day, that's it. That's literally it. That's amazing. No need for a million different other pills and supplements and all that extra stuff. Athletic Greens is it. To make it easy, Athletic Greens will give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your very first purchase. All you have to do, visit athleticgreens.com/Johnston. It's CJ's last name. Like, how easy? It doesn't get any easier than that. athleticgreens.com/Johnston to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. CJ, it is time to look through all of the first round series of the playoffs. Are you ready for this part of the podcast?
I am. I just got to make sure I don't contradict anything I've written. Make sure I get the right predictions.
Oh, dude, I'm with you there. I have my this book in front of me where I wrote down all of the predictions I made on another podcast, the Yahoo Sports Hockey podcast, and I have it in front of me, and I'm making sure that I'm remaining consistent on all of my predictions. So I totally understand the feeling. Do you want to start with the series you are most comfortable with? In this case, being Tampa Bay versus Toronto.
Sure. What do you want? Talk about the series or have a prediction?
Let's talk about the series, man. Like, let's just give general thoughts about each of these series. And then when it comes time for us to give, which way you're leaning, we can talk about that. I think we'll talk about this one quite a bit, considering the familiarity with both teams here. But there's a lot to talk about when it comes to these two teams.
Well, I find it funny that in a series that features Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, Braden Point, William Nylander, Victor Hedman, Morgan Riley. I mean, so many great offensive players that the first day or two leading into the series is talking about violence, in part due to a pretty clever quote from Sheldon Keefe saying he expects borderline violence in the series. I understand Tampa and the Leafs have played 2 recent games, and the last one resulted in more than 100 penalty minutes. And so there's probably some carryover there. On the fourth line of these two teams, I mentioned all the sort of star power in the series. You've got guys like Pat Maroon, Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, Corey Perry, Wayne Simmons, Kyle Clifford. Colin Blackwell. Anyway, I think that's maybe where some of it comes from. Zach Bogosian might get in the series from Tampa's end of things, Igor Labushkin from the Leafs. But, it starts off talking about the violence. I think we'll probably end up talking about some special performances from, I would think that group of star players that's going to tilt things one way or the other. And, you look at Tampa's last 2 cup wins. They don't do that without Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov in particular having massive monster playoffs. Kucherov had over 30 points each of the last 2 playoff years. That went a long way to helping Tampa win 8 straight series. And so if Toronto's going to ultimately have that success, I would suggest it's probably going to be Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, those guys having a big spring, or maybe it's Tampa doing it again and probably led by their stars. So, I'm curious about that dynamic. I think that the biggest question probably from the Leafs end is goaltending, how Jack Campbell deals with any adversity that might come his way. If things go wrong early, does it knock him off the rails? He's been very, very good when he's been good this year, but he also had a pretty long stretch where he wasn't at his best. And so I think it's a compelling series on a number of levels. And I really think it's going to go the distance. I picked the Leafs in 7 in this series. And I'd be surprised if it ended any sooner than 6 games, no matter which team comes out on top.
Okay, I have Lightning in 7. I think the goaltending. I think goaltending is going to be a big factor for pretty much every series. But the Lightning have the best one in Andrei Vasilevsky, and they have the offensive firepower to do it. They have the defense, obviously, and there's one thing that the Lightning have a lot of mileage on them over these last how many years because of the Stanley Cups that they have. But there's a reason why they got out guys like Brandon Hagel into their lineup. I mean, Corey Perry, I know he's played a lot over these last few years too, but he's going to contribute. They have some other players like Nick Paul as well, who don't necessarily have that wear and tear, who I think could also be a factor in that playoff series. So I'm leaning towards Tampa in 7, but I think the Leafs could really, is going to be a series. I would be shocked if it ended in 5 or 6.
No, I mean, it might come down to sort of confidence or fragility. I think the Leafs have to prove they don't have that. I mean, they didn't have it in the regular season. They had a slow start in October, and they still went and got the most points and wins in franchise history. They had all these great individual performances in the regular season, but, the playoffs is a different crucible. And until you see it from them, you can't say they have it. I'm certainly not of the belief that there's something about this particular group of star players that's flawed. I think that all it is they haven't done it yet. But again, that's just a feeling that has to be proven right at some point. And so, I think that there's the sort of what do they call it? The demons. There's a great quote from that behind the scenes show that was done, the All or Nothing series, or just, it's Paul McLean who sort of helps out on the coaching staff, kind of a coaching advisor. And he's just saying these guys got demons in their cars, demons under their beds. Can they slay some of those demons? I think it's not just complete narrative to suggest, that there's been some paralysis here in the past for some of the top performers. And so, that'll be fascinating to watch if Tampa can put them under duress, if they can bottle up Matthews and Marner early on. And obviously the media will be piling on, probably the fans and hockey Twitter will be going, how do they fight through that? Maybe Jack Campbell, if he has an off day or off night, how does he bounce back from that? I mean, these are questions that until the Leafs prove it and show it, they haven't done it. But, as I say, I really think this series is going to the distance. And, having home ice for Toronto, I think will be beneficial both for matchups and energy. And remember, it's the first series with fans in the building that the Leafs have played in a couple of years. And I do think that will be beneficial, particularly for the games here in Toronto.
There are a few shows on this very network you're going to want to pay attention to for more analysis on this Leafs Lightning series, notably the SDP, but also Game Over Toronto. And there are a few other Game Over shows you should check out as well. So we both say this series goes 7, but we're picking opposite teams. You're picking Toronto. I'm picking Tampa. So that's one down. Let's go to Washington and Florida. I think the Florida Panthers, being the team that they are, should have no issues with the Washington Capitals. What say you?
The same. I picked Panthers in 5 in my North Star Bets Monday Inside the NHL column. I wrote that yesterday. I don't feel any different a day later. Nothing's changed in my analysis of it. Washington's had trouble with the goaltending. They're just not. Basically, Florida is now what the Capitals were at their best. I mean, they're just a dynamic offensive juggernaut. And, Washington just isn't that now. I mean, they still have Ovechkin. They have players that have had a lot of success in the league, but as a team, they just don't control the shot share enough. And I just think with how fast the Panthers play, how prone they are to putting the puck in the net, they're never out of a game. We saw that multiple 3-goal comebacks where they won games this season. I don't see them having a huge amount of difficulty in this series, and so I think it'll be a quick one.
Okay. I also have Florida winning in 5 in that series. The one thing I'll say about Washington, though, you made a very good point just now. The Florida Panthers are where the Washington Capitals used to be, a team with just loaded with offensive talent, really good team to watch. You know what happened? Remember what happened to them in 2010 when they were the top team in the National Hockey League? They lost. They lost their first round series. They got shellacked. There's a part of me that wonders, what if Washington kind of reverses that and does that to Florida this year? I'm picking Florida, but you did mention on a previous episode, we could be in for upsets. How crazy of an upset would it be to see the Capitals with the players that they have and the expertise they have in the playoffs, even though they don't have as strong a goaltending as other teams, find a way to pull this off against the Florida Panthers, the best team in the NHL? That would be insane.
It would be. This is why you watch. This is why we're billing these 2 weeks is so exciting. Is that's going to happen probably in one of these series. It's not going to all go as we're predicting at the outset. I still feel good about the pick. I think the Panthers will learn too from that series they were in with Tampa last year. I mean, they were right there. I know it was a 6-game series, but that was entertaining. And maybe Florida's looking at it like if we had found a way to hang on and win a couple more of those games, maybe they're on a cup run last year. And so. I just think that the Panthers are ready to take a step, and this is as about a good a first round matchup as you could hope for Florida. I think just because the East is full of 100-point teams, there's no easy matchups, but I think Washington is a bit of a fading glory in the league right now.
Florida would be a win over the Capitals, a playoff series win. There would be their first playoff series win since 1996. You want to talk about teams who haven't won a series in the Atlantic Division in a while? The Florida Panthers know all about that. So we both have them winning in 5. The Penguins and the Rangers. Where do you go on this one?
I've got the Penguins in this series. I don't feel super confident about it. I get a little bit of Last Dance vibes from the Penguins. Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang both are on expiring contracts. Sidney Crosby turned back the clock this year. If you look at his points per game, the way he performed, I just think that they'll summon a way through this series. They certainly should carry the play at 5-on-5 for the most part. They certainly were a better offensive team than New York was throughout the year. Shesterkin did have such a great season, but we haven't seen him really do it in the playoffs. And so I think the task is a little different for him than it was. And so that'll be a challenge and something to watch. But I think I picked Pittsburgh in 6. So I don't see it as being a quick, easy series, but I also do believe the Penguins are kind of in the weeds. I'm not saying they're going to win the Stanley Cup, but they've kind of been overlooked a little bit this year. And I like their team. And I think that this is a pretty good matchup for them.
Goaltending let down the Pittsburgh Penguins last year. I think that Tristan Jarry not being healthy is also going to kind of impede them this year. I also just like how the Rangers are built as well, having Igor Shesterkin, but also Adam Fox and Artemi Panarin as well. Sorry, Artemi Panarin. I got to make sure I enunciate properly here. They have the weapons and the coaching to be able to get through a playoff series. And I think they're going to be able to do this in 6. So we go the opposite ways here on this particular series. You have Pens in 6, I have Rangers in 6. Yes, we don't have to agree on every single pick here. I'm glad with that. What about Boston, Carolina? Yes. I have Carolina in 6. What about you?
I've got Boston in 6, so that's a good one.
Oh, I love this. Yes. Tell me why Boston.
I mean, I see the teams as pretty even, actually. I think that this might be the closest series in the Eastern Conference in terms of the way the talent lines up. I'm worried about the Hurricanes goaltending situation. Antti Ranta starting game 1, his first ever playoff start. Frederik Andersen's situation is very murky, up in the air. We know he's had knee injuries in the past, so I'm not sure that we'll see him in the series or what degree we'll see him. And so I think that that's going to swing in Boston's favor and give them a slight edge, even though they got to go and start the series on the road in Raleigh.
Okay, so to recap, you have Leafs in 7, Panthers in 5, Penguins in 6, Bruins in 6. I like these. These are good picks. I like these.
Except you have 3 of the opposite picks. So how can you like my picks?
Well, I mean, I like the fact that they're different from mine, but I also don't think your picks are all that far off. I mean, I do, for recap for me, I have Lightning in 7. I have Panthers in 5, Rangers in 6, Carolina in 6. So yeah, there are some differences, but no, I mean, your picks are pretty good too. I'm not going to tell you they're crap picks. What are we going to do? Just like leave you hanging out to dry, like, yeah, CJ, man, your picks are crap. No.
Well, when I go 4-0 and you go 1-3, it's going to be a bitter pill, my friend.
Ooh, okay, them's be fighting words. All right, I see you, CJ. Let's go to the Western Conference. St. Louis versus Minnesota. My pick for most exciting series of the first round to watch. I have the Minnesota Wild in 7. Where do you go?
Me too. It's hard to pick that series. Both teams finished so strongly. Minnesota barely lost for a month, but a couple of games they did lost were head-to-head with St. Louis, which may or may not matter. I think sometimes we make too much of that, but they were recent games, so that's times when they've stacked up the lineups that are going to battle out in the playoffs. And I just think that the Wild really have kind of an X factor. I think offensively they're going to have slightly easier time in this series creating goals. Marc-Andre Fleury bolsters what they're doing in net, and so yeah, in a series where there's really not a ton of edge to be found or clear edge to be found, I think the Wild are going to pull it out and win it at the distance.
Okay, so Minnesota in 7 for both of us. What about the Los Angeles Kings versus the Edmonton Oilers? Who wins in that series?
I think it'll be closer than some expect. I've got the Oilers in 6, but I don't think it'll be easy. You kind of highlighted it earlier, spotlighted it, the sort of defensive centers of the Kings against the highly offensive guys of Edmonton. I think Danault's experience in the playoffs will be beneficial to the Kings in terms of trying to disrupt or plant some seeds of doubt in the Oilers' minds. But, where I like Edmonton, maybe even as a sleeper pick for a longer-term playoff run, is that Mike Smith has gotten super hot, winning all those games down the stretch. He wasn't overtaxed during the season because he did miss time with injury, and Mikko Koskinen for a period was taking the ball in net. And so I think he should be refreshed. Obviously, he should be confident with how he's played. And to me, that's a nice formula for Edmonton to not only win this series, but maybe to try to be a sneaker team that might be able to pull off an upset in round 2.
How funny is it that the Edmonton Oilers, a team that we've discussed all year as a team in need of goaltending, possibly even being active at the market for goaltending, they enter the playoffs, not only with Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen, but Mike Smith playing his best hockey of the year. Like, that is hilarious to me.
Just shows you, like, you make plans and God laughs, as they say, right? It's
he does.
Just when you think something, things change. I mean, that's sports and that's hockey. That's what's beautiful, particularly goaltending, right? It's a difficult position because the performances ebb and flow. Only the very best are really good all the time. But the truth is most goaltenders do have ups and downs. And right now, Mike Smith's riding a real up. And as long as he can keep that up, I like the Oilers' chances.
I, too, also have the Edmonton Oilers in 6. We seem to be on the same page with the Western Conference series so far. What about Nashville, Colorado? I think the next 2 we're going to be on the same page, too, unless you have some big upset you want to tell us. Nashville, Colorado is the next one.
No, Colorado in 4. The UC Saros injury is damaging to the Preds. A sweep's hard to pull off. You don't see really a ton of sweeps, but if anyone's going to do it in the first round, I think it's going to be the Avalanche.
Okay, I too have the Colorado Avalanche in 4. I haven't looked at the schedule, but I assume the series, the first 4 games are going to be within the first 8 days. So I wonder if Daryl Sutter is going to be right. What about Calgary versus Dallas? Speaking of Daryl Sutter.
Yeah, Flames in 5 for me. Love their team. I know I've said on a previous episode, I think that they probably have the best chance of the Canadian teams to have a long playoff run if we had to pick one. I don't see anything really in this series that should give them too much pause. Dallas really struggles to score as it is. The Flames are a great team at limiting chances, and when they do give them up, Jacob Markstrom has really had a fantastic season, 9 shutouts. So, it's hard for me to see the path to victory for Dallas. Anything's possible, but those will probably be grinding, lower scoring games. But I just think Calgary will overwhelm them ultimately. They just had so many players have great years this year, whether it's Elias Lindros, Goodrow, Matthew Tkachuk, even Andrew Mangiapane. Like there's a lot to like with that Calgary team, the way they're playing. And I think that'll be pretty easy work for them in that series.
To recap the predictions from CJ, Leafs in 7, Panthers in 5, Penguins in 6, Bruins in 6, Wild in 7, Oilers in 6, Avalanche in 4, Flames in 5. Those are some pretty good picks. And then for me, I have the Wild in 7, Tampa in 7, Rangers in 6, Oilers in 6, Panthers in 5, Canes in 6, Avs and Flames in 4. I have 2 sweeps that will happen in the playoffs in the first round this year. So we're just going to have to see if I'm right or CJ's right. We'll have to wait and see how that goes down. Okay, it is time for Ask CJ to wrap up the Chris Johnston Show for this here Monday. I only have a few questions for you because we know this episode has gone on long enough. You know, I told Adam that it was going to be a long episode, and he said some words I can't repeat on this podcast. Let's take a question from Turn Offsides Off on Twitter. Which team is the dark horse candidate for you this year? Meaning, which team is going to surprise everyone as Montreal did last year and go way further than expected?
I think Edmonton, as I've sort of mentioned, I could see doing that. And the other one I have is Boston. And maybe that lines up with my pick of them over Carolina. I think, you know, if Boston beats Carolina, that'll be a surprise. They're lined up now if that were ever to happen. They're in the Metro division, so they don't have to face one of their Atlantic brethren, at least until the third round. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see the Bruins go on a big run this playoffs. You know, even the Bergeron factory still performing at a high level, but his teammates will know that there's no guarantee that this might not be it. And so I think the Bruins are a team we've maybe slept on a little bit, you know, from a national standpoint. I know they get lots of love in their own market, but I think them or the Edmonton were the two sort of underdog or what have you teams. I don't see it being a Predators or Stars or Kings. I just don't think it's the time for any of those teams.
Funny you mentioned those 3 teams because the second half of that question says, which do you think of the Stars, Preds, and Kings will survive the longest? And according to your predictions, you have Oilers in 6. So you're saying the Kings are going to be the team that lasts the longest of all those 3 teams. And they will
be one more day than one of the others. So yeah, I'm not exactly saying it's going to be that much difference for any of the 3 of them.
Okay, let's go on to the next one from MTN, which is probably short for Mountain Operator. If the Leafs get eliminated in the second round, is it still a successful season? The second round.
Depends how it happens. A sweep is different than if they go 7. But yeah, I think success. The only real success for a team built like Toronto is winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, they've been a top 5, top 6 team in the NHL for a number of years now. But, you know, they have to win a round at some point. And so I think that it's moderate success should they get by the first round and go out in the second. But like they could look at that. They might beat Tampa and have to play Florida, for example. And if they lose to the Panthers, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of shame in that. And so, yeah, I think winning the first round counts as moderate success for the Leafs.
Next question from Wham876543. I have to deliver an apology to Wham because I mentioned his username wrong the last time he had a question. So my bad. Snacks of choice while watching Stanley Cup playoff games if you're watching from home.
Oh, I try not to snack too much, but if I'm going to have a guilty pleasure, I'd like a Ruffles all-dressed chip.
Ooh, yes.
You know, and if not a delicious pizza, which I've mentioned, I know on the pod, my affinity for that particular chain, but those are the kind of snacks I'm looking at, but I'm trying to avoid doing that. So probably just be guzzling the water, when I'm at home watching the games.
CJ, we have one last question for you, and then you can take a nap.
It's been a long day.
I could tell. Yeah, no offense taken. From Red Shark Pack on Discord, what's the biggest difference in covering a team in the playoffs versus the regular season as a reporter?
You know, the players tend to get a little bit tighter, more emotional, which is actually nice. One of my favorite things about covering the Stanley Cup final or covering a team when it gets close to winning the final is I actually find players get quite sentimental at times. More willing to sort of reflect on their journey to getting to, so close to their dream, talking about influential parents or coaches or friends or people that helped get them there. being really open to those kind of discussions, which I think can lead to productive stories at this time of year. Obviously access is more curtailed. So there's a little less time with the players. There's more reporters trying to tell the same story. So it can be hard to differentiate yourself. But for the most part, I mean, athletes in the sport are great to deal with. And I think the biggest sort of difference is just the everything around the games is just heightened. And that's the anticipation, the hype, when things go bad, like it feels worse. And so there can be there's just a lot of emotion involved. And so you see some interesting things said, or maybe some players tighten up and don't give you as much as usual. That's probably the biggest difference. But it's the best time of year. And as I say, I really love when you're about to cover a team about to win, no matter what team it is. There's just always so many great personal stories among that team. And it's been my experience over the last 16 Stanley Cups, I guess I've covered, that players in that position are really open to kind of discussing how they got there and what it means, and thinking about bringing the cup to their hometown and all that stuff. Like, I think there's some really nice stories to be told. And so maybe the guys let their guard down. It's almost like the longer it goes, it's just such a grind. You can't even have time or energy for a guard. And so, believe it or not, sometimes guys get even more open than normal the closer we get to seeing that Stanley Cup handed out.
I still can't believe you've covered 16 Stanley Cups in your life.
I know, and I still look this young.
Yes, that's true. That's it, baby. You out here looking young. CJ, thank you so much for going through all the questions, going through everything on this edition of the show that bears your name. Playoffs, they begin today. Enjoy them. Enjoy them all, because we are going to be in for a very fun ride over these next few weeks. And be sure to keep it locked here to the SDPN network for all the great content, all the great podcasts, all the fun stuff that is due to come over these next few weeks with the Game Over shows, the SDP as well, Agent Provocateur, and of course our show. We're going to have ourselves a lot of fun over these next few weeks. For CJ, I'm Julian saying so long. Eid Mubarak to everyone who celebrates, and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.